BudSub1, and we have a joint informational hearing on K-12 school facilities, our program, our history, our current status, and future options. And so I want to thank all of you for being here this morning for our informational hearing. And I'd like to acknowledge that Senator Marty Block, the chair of the Senate Budget Subcommittee on Education, as a joint convener of today's hearing. We're here today to discuss the significant changes proposed by the governor regarding the way in which we meet our school facility needs. The governor has noted his concerns about an overly complex program and the state's growing debt service obligations. He's also indicated his interest in engaging the legislature and stakeholders to discuss a new program for school facilities construction and modernization. I share the governor's concerns about meeting the needs for administrative and programmatic reform of the existing program. And let me see. I'm going to hold this up to you. This is the current way the process begins. There are 5 departments and 6 pathways to get to the end product. So it is very, very confounding, and this is an illustration of the construction process for any new projects, and it's my hope that this hearing is just the beginning of a series of conversations on our state school facilities program, its strengths and weaknesses, and the potential for better alignment between the program design and the state's policy objectives. I have a bill, SB 114, serves as a vehicle for the outcomes of these conversations, and while the bill contains some elements that reflect policy priorities expressed in this committee last year, I look forward to working with the administration and stakeholders to modify its contents as the dialogue envisioned by the governor's advances. So today's hearing, good morning, should give us an opportunity to hear about the governor's proposal in more detail, consider various alternatives, and hear updates and various perspectives on the past, present, and future of our state schools facilities program. With that, Senator Block, you have introductory remarks, and I welcome other remarks too from our members.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Liu. You know, in plain English, I think everybody in this room, in both sides of the aisle, all the departments represented, third house folks, people in the Assembly as well as the Senate, we all agree that kids deserve a safe place to learn, a clean place, a comfortable place, a place that's conducive to learning. We all agree on that. My guess is we all also agree that there are parts of the state right now, many parts of the state, where that just doesn't exist. There are districts where the facilities in which we send our kids to learn are almost third world in their condition. With all of that agreement, the next step then is how do we get from the current condition in many of our districts to the condition that we think is ideal, the condition to which we aspire. And that's really what the hearing is about. And we'll hear from several different offices. They'll give us their proposals on how we get from here to there. And the joint committees will then weigh the various options we have. And during the course of our budget hearings this year and the policy hearings, we will hopefully work with the governor's office and the other stakeholders to formulate a plan that will provide for our students the kind of learning environment they deserve.
Thank you. Senator Huff, Vice Chair. Senator Morrell.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have made some progress in recent years. California, though, still has too much debt. And I do appreciate the governor's emphasis on reducing the state's wall of debt, but at the same time, we also need to ensure that our school facilities needs are met. So I'm interested in exploring both of those options. I just want to make sure we don't make the mistake of passing debt on to our children and the next generation, especially in light of the fact in 2014, California still had the second worst credit rating in the nation. I also support returning control to the local municipalities and authorities who know the priorities of their schools and their students best, and they can most effectively spend the money. from local controls. So the process of obtaining bond monies from the state is complicated, and it can leave some of our schools disadvantaged. For an example, K through 12 attendance is growing rapidly in my district, so we do need funds for construction, but there are other districts where the registration is declining, and they should be able to use some of those funds accordingly. And lastly, I look forward to the governor's proposal, and again, hope that what we can do is return control to the local municipalities and let parents and teachers and the school boards make those decisions at the local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, any other comments from members? All right, let's invite our first panelists, Mr. Bruce Hancock and Mr. Bill Savage, both of whom have served as staff to the State Allocation Board. And our panelists will help us understand what was envisioned in 1998 when the program was created, as well as highlighting some of the issues and challenges which exist under the program today. So welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, staff members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. My time is very, very brief, and I will try to respect that carefully. My name is Bruce Hancock. For the last 10 years, I've been a consultant to school districts, architects, and construction management firms on the processes of the State Allocation Board, the Office of Public School Construction, and in general, the current school facility program. Prior to that, I was an employee of the State Allocation Board in the position now held by Mr. Savage. I began that position within days of the chaptering of SB 50 on August 27, 1998. I was heavily involved in writing the regulations to implement the program. I have been asked to briefly address what I believe were the primary goals and objectives of the Leroy F. Green School Facilities Act of 1998, also widely known as the School Facility Program, or SFP, which was created by Senate Bill 50 16 and a half years ago, and which continues in modified form to this date. In my opinion, the primary goal of the new school facilities program at that time was simplification. It was commonly believed that the prior state facility program, known as the lease purchase program, had become complex and burdensome with excessive state agency oversight and control. The authors of the SFP legislation addressed this issue, or attempted to address it, in a number of ways. The SFP simplified the calculation of the amount of the state financial contribution by eliminating the complex lease purchase program formula, which was a case-by-case analysis of each project, and replacing it with a per-pupil grant. The per-pupil grant was the same for any project built at a specific grade level. The apportionment of funds was streamlined by accepting and funding project applications only when a project was completely approved by the Department of Education and the State Architect's Office and ready for construction. The prior lease purchase program had 3 separate apportionments, one each for design, site acquisition, and construction. The school facility program eliminated state liability in the projects by adopting a full and final provision within SB 50. Simply put, that meant that after the SAB apportioned a project, all liability for change orders and other unanticipated costs, including legal challenges and disputes, was placed on the school district. The previous lease purchase law had required the placement of liens on all school properties once an apportionment was made to a district. This was widely seen as an example of state intrusion into local school district affairs. The school facility program eliminated the requirement, removed all of the existing liens that had been placed at that time, and eliminated the cumbersome and time-consuming processes for placing and removing the liens. Over the years that it was in effect, the prior state program took differing approaches to the question of local contribution. The new school facility program under SB 50 set a specific local dollar-for-dollar match, 50-50, for new construction projects and 80%, 20% match state to district for modernization projects. A financial hardship program was included in SB 50, which provided a mechanism for the state to fund some or all of a portion of the district's match under certain circumstances. Cost containment and efficiency provisions were also a part of the new program. These requirements appeared to be based on the belief that more efforts were needed at the local level to contain construction costs. SB 50 specified that any savings on a project, including unexpended state funds and other interest earned, would accrue to the school district for other capital outlay purposes of the district's choosing. This was seen as an incentive to investigate and utilize cost reduction techniques when designing and constructing a project. The State Allocation Board was directed to produce cost containment guidelines for district use, which were subsequently published in 2000 and are still available to this day on the OPSC website. The State Allocation Board was directed to acquire construction plans appropriate for various climates and geographical conditions and make them available at cost to school districts. This portion of the bill was never adequately realized. Although not directly related to the facility program, an important part of SB 50 was developer fee reform through the suspension of local government powers related to school facilities needs, while recognizing a school district's authority to levy fees on development. It set a cap on the amount that could be collected, yet while providing specific circumstances and a process for exceeding the cap by proscribed amounts. Even though SB 50 was chaptered on August 27, 1998, the State Allocation Board was directed in law to adopt emergency regulations for the entire program within 2 months by November 4, 1998. Although some might disagree that this was a goal of SB 50, I believe it very definitely was. This very specific provision and the fact that regulations were required even before the effective date of the bill, which was contingent on the passage of a state bond in November of that year, clearly signaled to me and many others that the bill reflected a belief that the administration of the lease purchase program using handbooks and guidelines rather than regulations was at times arbitrary and inconsistent. In my opinion, containing the previously wide-ranging authority of the State Allocation Board was an intended outcome of the legislation. SB 50 was a large and comprehensive bill containing sweeping changes to the state's involvement in K-12 public school construction in California. Of course, there were many more provisions that I do not have the time to address today, but I believe I have highlighted the primary objectives as I saw them of the state facility program, which again were simplification, a specific local contribution to projects, cost containment and efficiency, developer fee reform, and a regulation-driven process. I'd be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Salvage.
Good morning, chairs, and thank you for the opportunity, members of the committee. I'm Bill Savage. I'm the Assistant Executive Officer for the State Allocation Board, and I'm going to be speaking from a presentation that you should have in front of you. Mr. Hancock's given you some background information on the program, and I'd like to take the next step and look at some of the successes of the state and local partnership represented by SB 50 and the school facilities program, but also consider some of the changing times that we're in the state of California. And so if you'll go to slide number 3, and this is entitled State and Local Partnership. And this is some financial data on the success of the program and what we have funded under SB 50, over $20.5 billion on new construction through 3 programs, including over $3 billion spent on land for new school sites in California. $12.4 billion on modernization, with 135,000 classrooms modernized in California. And I think it's important to note, at the bottom you'll see $3.4 billion spent on financial hardship, as an equity contribution where the state can fund up to 100% of a school facilities project, providing a match where local districts may not be able to make their local match. On page 4, one of the things that is important to recognize is that the school facilities program has touched every region of the state of California. This is the regional breakdown for funding of projects in California, including an analysis of state funding per student. And it's interesting to note that Los Angeles, as the largest region in California, received the largest amount of funds. However, the largest per pupil expenditures under the state program occurred in the Inland Empire, Riverside and San Bernardino counties, where we experienced explosive growth in the state during the last 17 years, and that's reflected by the amount of money that was funded, amount of projects that were funded in that area. On page number 5, probably the most important thing to remember about the state program is that it's a local partnership. Local school districts from 2000 to 2014 have voter authorized over $80 billion in local general obligation school bond funds in order to match state funds. Many school districts in California are on their 3rd or 4th local bond to fund school facilities. And it's important to note, and it is noted in some of the other reports you'll hear from today, other speakers, there's still $30 billion in voter-authorized, unissued local bonds available. These funds at the local level leverage the state money, and they also provide a point at which you get developer fees that come in for new construction projects, there's mitigation agreements related to new development, and there's city and local agency funds, and these have a direct impact on the local economy through construction jobs in those areas. The program has been successful and it's been widespread in California, but we are in a time, if you'll go to page 6, where the conditions that led to the establishment of this program have changed. We are looking at, and you'll see a graphic for K-12 enrollment that shows we're in a period of declining student enrollment in California. And so potentially the focus on new construction may be evolving. Even with declining enrollment, we know we'll have areas of growth, and we think that they'll be in the same locations, Inland Empire, Central Valley, that we have them now, so we still have need for new construction funding. But our current program, the baseline eligibility for participation was established prior to the recession, and we're carrying data and information about need that is far out of date. So reestablishing our baseline eligibility for any program is an important step. On page 7, I think that it's fair to say that the challenge of modernizing our existing facilities is probably the single most critical need that we have in the state of California at this time. We have an aging building stock in California. Over 50% of our schools are more than 25 years old, and 10% are 75 years old. We've had decreased maintenance funding, and so our current modernization eligibility is actually quite low and probably doesn't accurately reflect the need for modernization funding, which brings me to a point that's important to note. We have no statewide inventory of school facilities information in California. And it would seem to me that if you're making policy and finding ways to direct policy from the state level, we at least need to have some information about the schools in the districts in California, and we have no current inventory of our facilities. One of the things, I was a facility director for many years at the local level, and one of the things that districts are doing more and more throughout the state is what we call replacement modernization. Some of the school facilities that we're dealing with are so far beyond salvaging that the correct approach and the most cost-effective approach is to knock them down and build them over again. And you'll see a graphic of that on the right side. This is De Anza High School in Richmond. And what this process does is essentially take the old building, knock it down, build a new school in its place. It's cost effective, no new land is needed to be bought, but it's extremely expensive, also requiring phased construction and temporary housing for students. On the modernization piece, I want to end on just one note, which is we have a significant challenge in the state. We have 75,000 existing portables in our schools. If you go to any school in California, you'll see portable buildings on the playground. These buildings are aging, they need work, and it's a significant issue for us in terms of replacement for those classroom spaces in California. So on page 8, moving away from new construction but staying on program challenges, it's always ironic to hear that the school facilities program was started because of the complexity of the lease purchase program. Now we have a program that also has grown more complex, and that was referenced by both the chairs in their opening comments. One area to consider is, and I think a lot of the discussion is focused on, we've had a proliferation of special programs which have really met important needs, but they've created a level of complexity. So considering the possibility of focus on modernization, new construction, and simplifying the overall program structure. And as has been mentioned before, we have grown an extremely complex regulatory environment for school facilities construction in California with an extremely costly bureaucracy, a lack of coordination between the agencies, and duplicative processes. And so when we go forward, let's consider ways that we can streamline that. And I want to take, in ending, two different snapshots of where we are in terms of some of our evolving state policy objectives. And on page 9, on the left side, we have a situation where our funding program is really based on the 960 square foot box for the classroom. And yet we have educational needs and we have educational program requirements that are much more advanced than that, and we need more flexibility to be able to design school facilities that contain collaborative spaces, spaces for project-based learning that reflect the evolving technology requirements. And so increased flexibilities for locals to be able to design the facilities they need for 21st century learning. And on the right-hand side, I think it is important to note that especially in many of our urban areas in California, schools are a focus of community life and can be a focus of providing community and supportive services for our students to help educate the whole child. And that would include health services, parent education, recreation centers, breakfast programs, libraries, and joint use facilities. So how we can find ways to prioritize and incentivize those types of facilities seems to be how we could help to meet important state policy objectives. On page 10, and just to finish up, one of the key areas of focus in the state of California is sustainability, and that two pieces of that, sustainable buildings, as we go forward in trying to meet our energy efficiency goals, in our greenhouse gas reduction goals in California. Schools have lagged, let's be honest with ourselves, and we've got Prop 39, 2012, that's providing some funding to get a focus on that, but schools need to be more a part of the state meeting its targets, and so we need to make every school a green school in California, and high performance standards are an important part of meeting that state policy objective. And I want to take a second just to remind everyone of the sustainable communities issues that we have. As we attempt to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals, reducing vehicle miles traveled, keeping development in a more concentrated, job-centered, pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly orientation is an important piece of this. And school districts need to be encouraged to plan together at the regional and level to be able to ensure that our schools are not leading growth and leading sprawl, and it's an important piece of us helping to meet that evolving state policy objective. And so in closing, I just thank you for the opportunity. We've had an extremely strong state and local partnership, and I believe that that will be crucial to us going forward to meet our school facilities needs. We have a changing state focus. New challenges require an evolution of our state program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members Senator Pan and Senator Leyva.
Thank you so much for your presentations, both of you. I represent a district which has both districts that are expanding and are looking at new construction, and actually districts that are shrinking in enrollment and closing schools and trying to figure out how to repurpose schools. I realize that we're talking about sort of school facilities and construction and maintenance. Is there a place, especially you're talking about sustainable communities and so forth, not just talking about what we're building anew or even maintenance, but when we have to close schools or what you call repurpose them or so forth? Does that fit in this scheme at all? Or, because we have this sort of, in some senses, churn that we have to deal with, and maybe the enrollment may expand in the future, who knows, but just your thoughts about the role of SAB and repurposing facilities if you have districts that are shrinking.
Yeah, this is a huge challenge, and there are many districts that are shrinking, finding ways to repurpose schools and ways that you can not dispose of the facilities necessarily, but still have them as a community asset it's a huge challenge, especially in some of our urban areas across California. So I don't have a specific solution for that. But the difficulty that we face is, as you said, expansion on some of the areas of a certain district and contraction in other areas. You can't move buildings, right, to meet that growth. And so school facilities I think they're an important asset. They need to be reused, and this needs to be part of the discussion. It's a great comment. Thank you.
Senator Leyva.
Good morning. Thank you for your very in-depth report, Mr. Savage. I had a question on page 3. We see those numbers, $20.5 billion, $12.4 billion, and those are really big numbers, and a lot of good has been done with that. But is it enough? Because I also switched to the next page, and my district has been very lucky to be the highest recipient of those funds. But I know there's also still a lot to be done in the Inland Empire. There's still a lot of old schools. So those numbers are big, but is it enough to really do what we need to do for our schools up and down the state?
Well, I think that one of the things that is very clear based upon the demographic projections that we have for the need for student enrollment is we do have growth areas, and those include some of the counties that might be familiar with to you: San Bernardino, Riverside, Kern, Tulare, Fresno, Madera, San Joaquin, Sacramento. Those are the key growth areas that have been identified in the student enrollment projections for the Department of Finance. And I did a presentation to the Assembly side last week on the need and looking at new construction need. There is still a need for new construction. And over the 10-year period, we saw a potential need of around $3 billion in terms of a state share, so an overall need of $6 billion, let's say, for local and state combined if we use our current program parameters of a 50-50 match. So you're right, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think a lot of our discussion is how do we do that? How do we evolve our program to continue to meet those needs, and then look at other evolving needs also.
Very good, thank you. Another quick question. The schools that you have torn down and rebuilt, I agree, it seems like sometimes that would be more cost effective. How has that worked for the student population as far as the time that they have to be someplace else? That seems like it would be a little bit of a challenge.
Most of the school replacements that we did, I did 2 high schools while I was there that we replaced, El Cerrito High and De Anza High School. We actually housed, the best case scenario is you build the new school on the fields adjacent and keep the school operational, and you still have plenty of impacts. If you can't do that for a number of reasons, which was the case at El Cerrito High, we had to house the students, the entire high school population, in portables for 5 years.
On that site?
On the site.
Okay,
and,
for 5 years.
But it was important for the school community to keep the school location. It was really about maintaining some of the community sense of a school, where it is, and the students and families coming to that, and their transportation patterns also already established.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hancock.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Mr. Savage very much for this presentation. It's very clear, and I think gives us some direction to build on. I've been on the State Allocation Board for about 4 years now, and I think the emphasis on simplifying our bureaucracy is very, very much needed for the benefit of districts and for the benefit of everyone in the state. Also, was struck by the fact that we have gotten so much money from voter authorized local bonds, really more than half of the entire amount that we've spent. So it definitely is a partnership, and I represent actually the area that Mr. Savage was talking about when we saw a very low-income community, West Contra Costa County, come forward again and again and again and pass bonds for its schools, which are now very beautiful, and realizing that this is such an important investment in our future. But I did want to underscore the high-performance schools issue, because schools are lagging behind on this. It is now virtually no more expensive to do this than it is to build a school that is not a high-performance green school. And studies have shown that students in a high-performance school actually achieve better on both reading scores and math scores because of the requirements for windows that actually open so you get fresh air, the requirements for sighting, for using daylight, all kinds of things that actually will help with our academic goals as well as with the physical health and the well-being of the students. And then, again, if we can do that in the context of community facilities that can be used by the entire community, I think that we'll be doing our communities a great favor and making every dollar count. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Senator Black?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I travel my district in the San Diego area, it seems clear to me that there are winners and losers in school facilities. In the north of my district, Del Mar district, you have high property values, a lot of bonding possibilities. The parents overwhelmingly support local bond measures, and the school facilities reflect that. In San Diego, large urban district, San Diego Unified, you again have bonding capacity in the northern part of the district, and while there's certain inequities, the district's been able to build some fine facilities in even the more needy parts of the district, largely with support of bonds and property values in the northern part of the district. But then you get down further south to the border areas in San Diego, and frankly, the schools there look more like schools in Tijuana than schools in Del Mar. With a state facilities program, that's disgraceful. So my question to you is, what's wrong? Why is that the case?
Well, I think that, you want to take, I'll give it a shot first. I think that the issue is, there's an issue of local capacity that goes beyond the local funding capacity. And I think there are many districts that need assistance and need internal management and internal capacity to be able to participate in the programs effectively and also to educate their communities. There's also, to be honest with you, as a facilities director from an urban area, it's more about crisis management many times than it is about a vision to be able to create great facilities. You go from my school burned down one day to the leaking roofs the next day. And so there's a way in which we need to provide not just the facilities funding, but also some assistance to local districts that need it in terms of their capacity and their ability to participate and their ability to move kind of beyond that kind of crisis management level at facilities that's so common in the urban areas.
That makes sense. Who should be providing that assistance?
And I don't know, and that's a good point. It might be a role that the state could provide as part of a program.